What if the world's most sensational alien discovery was built on stolen bones, animal skulls, and tiny Andean dress-up dolls? Someone went to extraordinary lengths to fool millions.
Grave robbers found them first. Ancient bodies, centuries old, buried in the Peruvian desert. Then came the knives, fingers removed, toes amputated, bones from other creatures grafted on. What emerged would fool millions, reach the floor of a national congress, and trigger a cover-up no one is talking about.
Beneath the sensationalized headlines of the ultimate alien hoax lies a lucrative black market. Here, huaqueros, illegal grave robbers, prowl the sacred pre-Hispanic burial sites of Peru's Nazca and Paracas deserts under the cover of darkness. The most devastating truth about the Nazca mummies is that the larger specimens, like the famous Maria, are not plaster fakes. They are authentic, centuries-old indigenous human remains, violently ripped from their resting places. To manufacture their extraterrestrial sideshow, forgers took blades to ancient flesh. They physically mutilated the corpses, systematically amputating fingers and toes to create a sci-fi three-fingered appearance. They didn't stop at amputation. The looters grafted on additional human phalanges, artificially elongating the remaining digits to mimic something otherworldly. It was a grotesque assembly line of desecration. To seamlessly hide the surgical scars, mismatched joints, and structural inconsistencies from the naked eye, the bodies were heavily coated in a white powder, claimed by hoaxers to be diatomaceous earth. This macabre cottage industry directly exploits Peruvian cultural heritage. It reduces deeply complex, ancient indigenous mummification practices to a profitable, destructive sideshow for internet theorists. The crisis grew so severe that the Peruvian Ministry of Culture was forced to invoke Law 28296, a desperate legal maneuver to confiscate the remains and protect human dignity. For local Nazca communities, the hoax is a daily insult. Their ancestors, once revered and carefully prepared for the afterlife, are now mutilated props in a global grift. But if the large bodies were tragic victims of grave robbing, the smaller, 60-centimeter figures presented to the world were something else entirely. They were pure Frankenstein.
On January 12, 2024, the illusion began to shatter. Dr. Flavio Estrada, a lead forensic archaeologist with Peru's Institute for Legal Medicine, stepped before a crowded government press conference.
Through rigorous radiology and infrared spectroscopy, Estrada's team peered beneath the white powder. What they found was a masterclass in morbid fabrication.
The smaller mummies were not aliens. They were essentially dolls, constructed from a bizarre hodgepodge of terrestrial bones, hastily assembled in a secret workshop.
The anatomical reality was shocking. The elongated, supposedly extraterrestrial skulls? They were actually the brain cases of llamas, heavily modified to deceive the public. Forgers had snapped off the llama's facial bones, turning the back of the animal's skull forward to mimic a bulbous alien head. Beneath it, they attached a chaotic mix of human, dog, and bird bones. In this historical debunking, researchers found zero advanced biology. Instead, the skeletons were held together with modern synthetic glue, paper, rubber, and metal. The joints completely lacked natural articulation. If these creatures had ever lived, they wouldn't have been able to stand, let alone walk or pilot a spacecraft. By early 2026, independent skeletal radiologists cemented the debunking. They highlighted obvious bone grafts, showing femurs facing the wrong direction and mismatched growth plates. However, this dual nature of the hoax, large mutilated humans and small animal bone dolls, creates a dangerous trap for skeptics. When sloppy debunkers blanketly label the entire collection as papier-mâché tourist dolls, they inadvertently hand ammunition directly to the hoax promoters. The saga of the Nazca mummies is a masterclass in modern media manipulation. It began in 2017, but the spectacle reached a global fever pitch in September 2023.
Mexican journalist and UFO enthusiast Jaime Maussan presented 2 of these alleged extraterrestrial bodies under oath to the Mexican Congress.
He falsely claimed that a third of their DNA was unknown. Politicians nodded. Cameras flashed. For a brief moment, the world wondered if we were truly not alone. However, the narrative quickly devolved into pure absurdity. In October 2023, Peruvian customs officials at the Lima airport intercepted a suspicious cardboard box destined for Mexico. Inside, they found more of the alien figures. But bizarrely, these intercepted dolls were dressed in miniature, brightly colored traditional Andean clothing. Despite this embarrassing seizure and the definitive forensic debunking, proponents pushed forward. In April 2024, the Peruvian Ministry of Culture attempted to raid a controversial press conference. They were desperate to prevent the further trafficking of looted remains, but the Media Circus had taken on a life of its own. The madness finally hit a wall in January 2026. In the biggest archaeology news 2026 had seen, a viral debunking video trended across every major social media platform. By systematically exposing the obvious bone grafts and amputations, the 2026 campaign successfully bypassed the UFO echo chambers, cementing the global consensus that the mummies were a destructive forgery. But why go to such elaborate lengths? The most counterintuitive truth behind the Nazca Mummy hoax is that it is a highly lucrative enterprise. This macabre Frankenstein operation fueled a massive disinformation ecosystem that generated millions of dollars. The financial windfall began in 2017 when the streaming service Gaia.com launched the Unearthing Nazca series. The company's revenue surged from $17 million to over $28 million in a single year. Meanwhile, the black market driven by these archaeological frauds thrives. Authentic looted Andean textiles and remains are sold in the shadows for $20,000 to $50,000 apiece. To legitimize the grift, promoters constantly deceived or co-opted credentialed academics, desperate to provide a false scientific veneer to their stolen goods. The deception reached a peak in April 2024, when promoters invited U.S. forensic scientist Dr. John McDowell to examine the specimens. They deceptively framed his preliminary observations to suggest he validated the aliens, forcing McDowell to publicly clarify that the entities were, in his words, never living entities. The hoax survives through psychological goalpost moving. When initial claims of extraterrestrial origins are disproven by earthly DNA evidence, promoters pivot. They suddenly invent pseudo-scientific buzzwords like divergent human intelligence or genetic manipulation to keep their audience hooked. By bypassing rigorous peer review and leveraging social media algorithms, the perpetrators have built a self-sustaining media engine. An engine that profits directly from the desecration of Peru's cultural heritage. The Nazca mummies were never a message from the stars. They are a mirror reflecting our own modern greed, our willingness to believe a comforting lie over a tragic truth. Beneath the glue, the animal bones, and the white powder lie the real victims, the ancient ancestors of the Andes, who deserved to rest in peace.